Hello my quilting friends! Leah Day here with a new video for the Machine Quilting Party. Today we're learning how to quilt desert sand. Really beautiful foundational design that you can quilt with both walking foot quilting and free motion quilting. So let's get started. I'll show you how to set a foundation and then expand it to create this beautiful design. So I'm getting started with desert sand and I have marked my foundation, and this is a fairly deep curvy line, so I'm going to have to stop and pivot the quilt as I follow this line. So deeper curves like this require just a little bit more fiddling and it's a little slower. So when I'm stopping, I stop and I'm using my knee lifter to lift the foot slightly, and then I rotate the quilt over. I'm just doing very subtle shifts, very subtle rotation there. It's not, really dramatic. I'm not making a big move like that, but I'm just rotating it just enough to stay on that line. And it's also important to be lifting the foot too, because it helps kind of release the tension of the quilt top. Sometimes if you quilt at an angle to the quilt top for too long, you can kind of start to pull the fabric in a weird way. I call that whiskering, and it kind of shows up as a strange ripple on the surface of the quilt. So it's really important to stop, use your knee lifter, lift slightly, or reach behind and lift up on the foot slightly, and do that little bit of a rotation as you go. So another design that's really similar to this that we've already learned is jagged plane. One of my favorite designs. It has a really nice sharp straight line and sharp angled foundation. Desert sand is a curvy version, but the idea is the same. We start with this foundational line, and wherever that goes and however it flows through the quilt, that's what sets the stage, that's what sets the texture of the design. And so this is think of it as a baseline, and everything that comes after it is going to be based on this line of quilting. And for that reason, it's good to take a little bit of time and plan it out. Even though I'm just stitching a square here, I took a little bit of time to plan it out and marked it on the surface because I wanted it to be a really nice shape. I wanted those points to be nice and pointy and to kind of flow throughout to create a really nice texture. And points, wherever we change direction, just stop with the needle in the down position. If you need to, kind of curl up the quilt. I just generally kind of roll it and squish it in the back of the machine. That works good with these blocks. If it was a bigger quilt, then I would just kind of squish and manipulate it around however I needed to. There we go. And I'm going to stitch out and beyond my marked square. And then now I'm going to stitch down, and I'm going to estimate and stitch lines 1/2 inch apart. If you remember, I'm working with Minky on the back. That's this fluffy stuff on the back of the quilt. I love it because it's going to make the quilt super soft. But the downside is it's shedding all over my quilt. So if I stop and lint roll, that's why, because I can't stand the shedding, but at the same time, I love the Minky and I think it's totally worth it. Okay, so now the next step of the design, we've got our foundation stitched. And now all we're going to do is travel stitch and echo it. And so I'm extending this point and kind of even gradually curving it a little bit right there. And I'm doing that because I want to stitch and space down, so that way when I rotate it around, then I can stitch and continue that curve 1/2 inch apart. This is kind of similar to super spiral in the sense that, we're going to have to kind of eyeball and estimate where that direction change is going to come in. If you need to, grab a marking pencil, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball it and say, well, that's pretty much looks like that would be the point where I should change direction. You could even grab a small ruler and measure it. I'm stitching on a 1/2 inch scale, so that would be measuring 1/2 inch from those lines of quilting, and just mark a dot. Sometimes that's all you need. In fact, actually, I'm going to go on ahead and mark the dot that I need for up here. So I know I'll be coming in something like this, maybe kind of curl that line in, and then coming from this angle down here. Let me shift up so you can see it. So this is the next point that I need to do. And I know I'm going to be coming through that angle and then through here. You could just kind of connect the dots, bring those two together and make it up as you go. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's the nice thing about these textures. They're very different, and it's a very different sort of design to quilt with your walking foot. So sometimes taking a little bit of time to plan it out and think about it on your quilt is really important. So now you might be wondering about where this will work best on your quilts. I think this is going to work great for many different things. You could use this as the background design in the Prism Path quilt. That would look really cool. You could stitch it over a color area of the Rainbow Log Cabin quilt. That would be a neat option too. There's section quilting can work really well for foundational designs because you have kind of the edges of your quilting space to work off of, and that can really be easy to stitch. You can also quilt these designs all over quilting wise. Just kind of have to plan it out and figure out how it's going to be stitched over the surface. But the basic steps, the basic rule is stitch that starting foundational design. And as you can see, slow and careful stitching there. Then all you're going to do is travel stitch and echo it to expand and fill the space completely. And here's what it looks like whenever I finished Desert Sand. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned a lot about desert sand and you'll give it a try this week. Now you can quilt this with both walking foot quilting and free motion quilting. And as far as which one is easier, that's entirely up to you. Walking foot quilting gives you the advantage of the machine and the feed dogs and the walking foot feeding the quilt forward for you, so you produce nice, even, consistent stitches. But with free motion quilting, you're more able to move the quilt in all different directions and get a really fluid, freeform design. So I encourage you to try it with both methods and see what works best for you. Now, if you'd like to learn more about walking foot style quilting, you can learn a lot with my new book, Explore Walking Foot Quilting with Leah Day. Inside, you'll find 30 beautiful designs as well as 7 fun quilt projects that you can quilt and learn how to do this beautiful style of quilting with. So check out the book at leahday.com/walkingfoot. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel on YouTube so you don't miss the next video coming out soon. Until next time, let's go quilt.